Who is Barack Obama, really? Once we get past the constant media adulation and past his admittedly very impressive rhetoric, and we peel back the layers of lies, who is this man? What did he do to America, and why does it matter today? For instance, if Obama is a so-called man of the people, then why did his administration only benefit the highest levels of America's economy while the masses suffered, and suffered greatly? Why did America's first black president work almost constantly to divide America, making race relations way worse, not better?
You know, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon.
Why is Chicago, the hometown that he turned his back on, why is this troubled city going to such gargantuan expense to build this tribute to the Obamas? The Obama Library right behind me. A bloated, delayed, massively over-budget boondoggle that really becomes a monument to absurdity and a monument to propaganda. To answer these questions, I am here in Chicago, where Barack really got his start as an adult. More specifically, we're going to ask Chicagoans to answer these questions. The compelling guests that you're about to meet, great people with keen insights. Personally, this city means a lot to me. I raised a family in Chicago, in the city, for 25 years, until crime, skyrocketing taxes, and cultural radicalism chased us out. Like so many other legions of Chicagoans who flee Obama's former city en masse to places of opportunity. For that matter, Obama himself, he fled. Once he made it, he quickly morphed. The community activist who claimed to be some South Side Chicago local, sporting a White Sox hat at every opportunity, well, once his political star shot to the moon and brought him to the White House, he suddenly became the Barack Obama of Martha's Vineyard, a central figure of the global celebrity culture, feted by adoring actors and business moguls, but someone without the time or the inclination to return to the city that made him. Ask any local here, and they will report that he's barely set foot in the Windy City post-presidency. So Marquita, you're a product of the Chicago area. Tell us about your upbringing.
Native Chicagoan, born and raised here. My first home was in Roseland. It is 97th percentile, one of the worst neighborhoods in the city of Chicago. And then I went on to move to Morgan Park. I was raised in a 1,000 square foot townhouse by my mother and my grandmother with two brothers. I remember times when, you know, I went to church for Mother's Day in the neighborhood I grew up in, and they talked about syrup sandwiches, and I was with my 22-year-old, and I kind of chuckled. It's like, no, that was real. You know, there were times where there was such scarcity, you know, what you would eat it was somewhat of a question, but my brother is a sergeant now for the police department, and one of the things we talk about is that 90% of the kids who grew up with us are either dead or in prison.
Really?
Yeah.
Marquita Hannis rose from the same streets where Barack Obama got his start in politics. She knows better than most what Obama had promised. He would help this neighborhood and other poor neighborhoods like it. But in reality, anyone who wants to climb out of this neighborhood will have to do it without the help of Barack Obama. You've become a very successful businesswoman.
Yeah.
So how did that happen?
I think, you know, it was my grandmother's guidance and always voice of you can choose. You know, it was self-empowerment. It was understand your worth, walk into any room and figure out what the best is, and you can self-actualize based on what you decide.
So when Barack Obama won in 2008, being from the South Side of Chicago, first black president in America, what were your thoughts then? What were your thoughts and your expectations?
You know, it was wildly symbolic. You know, this idea of the first black man occupying the office of presidency, you know, and at the time I was a single mom. My daughters were 5 and 7. And I remember when he gave the speech, I actually woke them up, and I remember them sitting on my lap as we listened. And I think we listened with the same hope and anticipation that the entire world did, that the rhetoric that his candidacy was based upon was something that we would actually see play out in a tangible way.
Of course, he had a massive election night victory party at a celebration at Grant Park, which is the lakefront park in Chicago. And I mean, it was as big a crowd as they've ever had there, right? Probably
I think it was 240,000 people. Okay. And I was afraid to go because of the crowd, because of my little ones, but we watched it.
It's been a long time coming. But tonight, because of what we did on this day, in this election, at this defining moment, change has come to America.
What happened next, in your view?
I think, there was the letdown. The letdown of not only was he not a president who had the opportunity and position to bring healing. I found that what he did was he drove us in the opposite direction. It was more tribalism than I had ever experienced in my entire life. I think there was probably a high expectation. That not only did I find him not to meet that expectation, he took us backwards. Mm-hmm. He didn't leave it better than he found it. I think he actually corroded some of the healing that I experienced in my teen, early 20s. And identity politics, it's not that he invented it, but it certainly was exacerbated through his presidency, which I think became a bigger dividing point.
Marquita recalls, only a few months into the Obama presidency, when the man who had campaigned on bringing the country together would actually work to pull us apart.
This all started last Thursday afternoon when police were called to Gates' home by a neighbor who said she saw two black men breaking in.
Harvard professor Louis Gates Jr. had locked himself out of his house and was seen with his limo driver breaking in.
They kind of had to barge in and they broke the screen door and they finally got in.
According to a police report, Gates initially refused to show his ID and then exhibited loud and tumultuous behavior and made accusations of racial bias in full view of the public.
Barack Obama would pounce, turning a small misunderstanding into a national lecture on race, claiming widespread racial bias in policing and laying the early groundwork for BLM.
The Cambridge police acted stupidly. That is a sign, an example of how race remains a factor in the society.
When he's like the police stupidity, my brother being a sergeant, having survived where we grew up, to now have him become a public enemy, I was enraged. I think that was the first time.
So you think your brother and other police were vilified by Obama?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And the irony is, growing up, I remember being conscious that I, as a young black girl, I wasn't afraid for myself. But I constantly had this conscious fear that one of my brothers would be killed. Yeah. It was just a reality where we grew up. So to fast forward and that not be the case, and to have that become the bullet that was now on his back after surviving literal bullets, and at the hand of an administration that really, again, had the power to evoke healing, calling out publicly the police stupidity versus, again, lead us. I think we went into an era with his administration. What I would find myself saying often was MLK, his vision was that we would be judged by the content of our character, and this administration fully reversed that. It was what color am I and how do I vote? And that was, to me, a detractor from everything that we both had survived and then worked for as adults.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
And what about the poor masses on Chicago's west and south sides? What has Obama done for them? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. While he becomes generationally rich, the Obamas got $65 million for their memoirs and a reported $100 million from Netflix for shows and movies. What did his people get, his supporters? Well, let's talk statistics. During his presidency, only the top 10% of wage earners, only the top 10%, saw their net worth increase from 2009 to 2016. The other 90% of earners actually lost net worth during Obama's 8 years in office, including a stunning 30% decline in the net worth of black households in America under Obama. For 90% of America to get poorer over an 8-year span, it's just unprecedented. The results in Chicago, the kind of place that is supposedly the center of Obama's agenda, well, they're just awful. And frankly, almost third world. For instance, Chicago has the largest life expectancy gap in all of America. On the Tony North Shore of the city, in Streeterville, not far from where I'm standing, life in those high rises is good. And the average lifespan is an impressive 90 years old. But closer to right here where I'm standing, in Englewood, just 6 miles or so from the posh part of downtown Chicago, the life expectancy average is only 60 years old, only 60. A 30-year age gap in the same city. Looking at younger folks here in the city of Chicago, 45% of black men aged 20 to 24 in Chicago, they are neither working nor in school. Of course, the failures of Chicago and the failures of Obama, they're not all about metrics, the easily quantifiable measures. For instance, look at race relations. Obama won election to the presidency in 2008, and at that time, race relations in America were actually in a terrific spot. Undoubtedly a big driver of his victory, of his winning, in fact. White Americans had no problem voting for a black man with a decidedly un-American sounding name like Barack Hussein. Americans displayed an entirely different approach to race issues, and our society was a very long way toward becoming the colorblind society that Dr. King challenged us to be. We were at long last living up to our own ideals, to the principles of our glorious founding.
When all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
So Kenneth, tell us about your childhood, about growing up in the city of Chicago.
So yeah, I'm kind of a South Sider and a West Sider at the same time. I grew up in the Roseland neighborhood, so 113th and Hostet, we call it the Wild Hundreds. But then I went to school and church, and my first job was actually here on the West Side. So this is Pulaski and Madison. If you go down Madison a little bit to Western, you'll hit a McDonald's. That was my first job.
Okay.
And then we went to church on Ashland and Ogden. And that was where my elementary school was too. So kind of got South Side roots, but also the West Side roots too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just to let the audience know, so we're a little west on Madison Street in Chicago is where United Center is, where the Bulls and Blackhawks play.
Where the Bulls play.
Once you get west of there, the neighborhood gets pretty tough pretty fast. And this is frankly one of the worst neighborhoods perhaps in America. I mean, I may be accurate.
No, that's true. So this is Garfield Park right here. And it's known for crime. I mean, I have 6 kids. And the one time that we were going to have a kid at a hospital in this area, I remember waiting for our doctor, and like 2 people walked in with like gunshot wounds that had just occurred.
Right.
I mean, it was that real.
Yeah.
And so, you know, gunshots is not at all foreign in this neighborhood, especially as it gets darker.
Yeah. Kenneth Woodard is the role model that Chicago needs. Growing up on the South and West Sides, surrounded by crime and poverty, he managed to claw his way out through hard work and perseverance. He has just graduated cum laude with a law degree from the University of Illinois at Chicago. He was also a devoted Obama fan, believing the rhetoric that Obama would help the neighborhoods who needed the help most.
So 2008, he's running. By that time, there was a big get out the vote effort. You heard about Obama everywhere. It was in the news. It was on the newspaper, ubiquitous online. Even at church, like my black pastor's like, y'all better vote for Obama. He's the first black president. You have to vote for him. Yeah. And I was like, yes, Pastor. I feel like I'd be in sin if I didn't vote for Obama. So it was everywhere. Everybody's talking about him.
And at first you were buying it.
Of course.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who didn't. I knew very few who didn't.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, he was smart, Harvard, editor-in-chief of his law review. He was a professor, and he said all the right things.
Chicagoan, which you had to love.
Of course, from the South Side.
Right.
Yeah, so of course, everybody was for him, and I was so bought into hope and change that I remember watching the inauguration at Buck Hall at my university, and then I remember saying, I'm going to track all the promises that he made during his campaign, and as they come to pass, put the dates on it. So if anybody ever says, you know, anything about Obama, I'll have evidence. Okay. I have demonstrated evidence. This is what he said, like he's going to close Gitmo day one. He said it, he did it. Except he didn't do, he didn't do a lot of those things.
Travel through Chicago's neglected Black and Hispanic neighborhoods, and you quickly realize Obama didn't do any of these things he promised. While America's wealthy got richer, those who were struggling fell further behind.
Ask me back then, what was I really expecting? I would have said the wealth gap to close. Because I saw my family go from what felt like stable, low to middle income to very low. The wealth gap, well, Obama said he would address that.
But whether we are rich or poor, change is what's happening in America.
I had my fights in thinking through politics, and this is the conclusion I came up with. I said, President Obama is a really good talker, but he's not a doer. Race relations aren't getting better. The wealth gap is not closing. But for all the highfalutin overtures that he made on the campaign trail about how America needs hope and change, like that crap, that didn't happen. And I'm still waiting for that.
We've been warned against offering the people of this nation false hope. But in the unlikely story that is America, there has never been anything false about hope.
What about the post-presidency? What have you done for us lately, Mr. President? Well, he's done very well for himself, luxuriating in a 6,000 square foot house on the ocean on the elite island of Martha's Vineyard with 7 bedrooms and 28 acres. But what about public service? Besides partisan campaigning, does he do anything to promote the common good? Does he, for instance, serve as an example for young people, modeling a life of service? Well, Professor Glenn Lowry of Brown University certainly does not think so. Here are the observations of this esteemed scholar and persuasive voice of Black America.
First Black president should have put Jimmy Carter to shame in his post-presidency by showing the way in which you could uplift those who are less advantaged than you around you through service and through a spiritual dedication to a kind of social commitment. Should have eschewed the invitation to join the global elite as a neo-billionaire personality, and should not have ridden the cachet of the historical event of the first Black president. I mean, I can't tell tell the difference between him and, I mean, you know, I don't want to insult him by naming anybody, but I mean, another one of these global celebrities who trots themselves around the world and buys estates on Martha's Vineyard. I have nothing wrong with people being rich. That they became that way by being the first black president causes me to harbor a certain degree of resentment. And the issue is not about the authenticity of the blackness. The issue is about the integrity of the life.
As Lowry makes clear, Obama had a historic, a profound responsibility as America's first black president. What did he do with this opportunity?
Obama kind of took it back a step, and he wanted to make sure that sort of anger that Martin Luther King was trying to put to bed was still there.
Richard Porter ran the Domestic Policy Council for the first President Bush and is a longtime student of Illinois and national politics.
Instead of highlighting how far America had come and his own great personal success and what it represented for America, he used that as a kind of a launching pad for highlighting grievances. You know, sort of anger about things long past and trying to keep that anger alive. I mean, it's like rather keep hope alive, keep the anger alive. Yeah. Why is that a good organizing principle for a society? It might be good for you to drive people for votes,
right?
But is driving for votes, is that the ultimate goal of why you're running? Was Martin Luther King was looking for that healing. He was holding us up, holding us to our own book of rules. What's it mean to be created equal? What's it mean to love thy neighbor? How are you acting like that when you have separate but equal? He was 100% right. I mean, he righted wrongs. Yeah. And so by the time Obama benefited from that, we all benefited from that. The truth is that made America a much better place to be. Thank God for that. That's why he's truly a hero.
Let me ask you about this. So hopes were high, I think, all across America, certainly in Chicago, black neighborhoods, when he got elected, that this was going to be a real propellant for racial healing, right? That America had achieved something really significant for the country, that a nation that once regarded black men as property elected one to be the commander-in-chief of the United States. However, it is my view that once he achieved that success and once he got that gift, once he earned that platform, that he actually used it to make race relations far, far worse in the United States. What are your thoughts?
The thing about Obama, he had that moment, right, where he represented the unification and sort of the, we reached the mountaintop. Here he was. And so many people voted for him to say, we're on the mountaintop.
Right.
We did it. We did it. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
And he just pushed people back off the ledge.
I think it's one of the biggest missed opportunities in American history.
Yeah.
It is one of America's greatest missed opportunities that our first black president chose to divide rather than unite this nation. And people are waking up to that reality.
Just this past November, Obama failed to move the needle at all for Kamala Harris. If anything, Obama's hectoring and condescending words alienated his former supporters, and he very likely became a net negative politically for the first time in his entire career in public life. Especially egregious was the way he talked down to black men in a completely disrespectful and dismissive way.
We have not yet seen the same kinds of energy and turnout in all quarters of our neighborhoods and communities as we saw when I was running. It seems to be more pronounced with the brothers. And you're coming up with all kinds of reasons and excuses, and you're thinking about sitting out. I've got a problem with that. You just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for that.
He talks down to Americans instead of respectfully trying to inspire them. He lives for the politics of division, and he wallows in the politics of casting shame upon regular people. Now, if we don't come to terms with what Barack really did with his power and come to terms with who he really is, then we will hold back our progress and success as a people. We are a great nation. We are founded on timeless principles. Principles that we certainly haven't always lived up to, but principles that stand as a protection against everything that Obama the charlatan wants for himself, for his benefit, and for the benefit of a tight cabal of connected cronies that he constantly favors. We're moving on. And Obama's relevance, the sooner that it fades away, the better it will be for our amazing republic.